Hi, everybody. I want to spend a little bit of time sharing more details about when, why, and how the decision is made to implement all remote learning. In presentations over the last 6 months, I've spent time sharing the details of our restart and recovery efforts and our contingency plans. I've shared the factors that dictate when we close school for in-person learning. Since questions and concerns linger, I'm sharing that information again with a greater level of detail in this presentation. I'm going to use last Friday's decision to go all remote as an example to help operationalize the decision-making process. Beginning in June, through our reopening committee work, we identified the health and safety of our school community as our top mission, the priority that matters most. It doesn't mean that the financial hardships this type of year has on families doesn't matter. It doesn't mean some of the experiences students may be short-shrifted of this school year don't matter. All these things, including childcare and other things, matter very much. But none of these things matter if we aren't healthy and well. In fact, we continue to lean into the core values that guided our committee work and allowed us this far to reopen schools safely and at the start of the school year. We continue to prioritize these values. Working my way up from the bottom here, we continue to offer whole child experiences. We've ramped up our technology access and support. We've adjusted curriculum, instruction, and assessment. And like in no other year, we've provided for really stellar social and emotional learning support. I'll talk more about that in a bit, but let's start by looking at where we are. 65% of Union County students have been fully remote since March. As I'll delve into in a few minutes, each district has its own set of unique circumstances that allowed it to open in September or continue with March's remote learning. We can't judge or compare to these districts, but we can celebrate that we were able to offer parents a choice. We were able to get kids in school. If they elected to send their children back, we provided that for families. We figured it out, we did it. More specifically, look at this data. Today was the 62nd day of school. We were able to open our buildings for in-person instruction 49 days at Harding and 47 days at Burley to date, which equates to opening for in-person instruction 80% of our school year so far. How do we do this? With lots of support from community members, Board of Education members, township officials, and others. We planned. They say an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Our planning was thoughtful, reflective, and ongoing. It tapped into thinking about finances differently and human capital differently too. We have this amazingly stellar school medical team. I touch base with them regularly, and rest assured they're working really hard to keep us safe, and their efforts are really impressive. Finally, we were able to do this too through the auspices of teachers. I receive dozens of emails a week from parents about teachers alone, about how great a child's learning experience is, how amazing and impressed they are that a teacher has gone above and beyond. Teachers have reinvented their practice and committed to our health and wellness protocols too. But I want to move away from celebrating and address lingering concerns. Take a look at some of them here. I thought the best way to share more about our decision-making was to identify fallacies and then use information to reframe them. I often refer to stakeholders, and here they are. While I take full responsibility for the decision to keep schools open for in-person learning, my decision is informed by the input of many, including first and foremost, our town's Board of Health officer. He has the most up-to-date health information and the most expertise. However, the input of these other constituents are irrelevant. But the decision to go all remote or not is not one that's made from a majority vote. It's not one that requires consensus. That would be impossible. Therefore, we must rely on data. There's a cliche that says, in God we trust, all others bring data. Data this school year reigns supreme. It informs 4 key considerations about deciding to implement or not all remote learning. Here's the first consideration. It's the New Jersey Department of Health's weekly report. Union County is in the Central East region. The report uses a color-coded system of COVID threat based on case rate, percent of COVID-like illnesses, percent positivity rates, and a total COVID activity level index score. The DOH guides us. When we're in orange or high risk, we are required to consider implementing fully remote learning. When we're in the red, we must. This is not the only consideration that guides us. We've been in the orange before and been open for in-person learning before. This week, we're in the orange, but aren't open for in-person learning. Here's why. Local data. This is why we pivoted to all remote learning. Our borough's health office has access to this data. It zooms in on the DOH's statewide report. This week, while our region was in orange, our town was in the very high-risk red category, along with 7 other towns in our county. As such, the strong recommendation was to implement all remote learning. What put Kenilworth and the other 7 towns in Union County in the red? A 7-day positivity rate greater than 20% per 100,000, a 7-day case rate greater than 20% per 100,000, and a rise in school-aged children testing positive in the last 14 days. The decision is not a syllogism. It's not a matter of if this, then that. For example, we pivoted to all remote learning when both the region and the town has been in orange. Here's why. Consideration 3, because we've had school-based cases that fall into the New Jersey Department of Health's regional risk matrix, recommendation to implement all remote learning. There were times when the state data was in the orange and the township data was in the orange too, but we needed to shift because of the number of cases in our buildings. The new COVID-19 dashboard that I hope you had the opportunity to look at last Friday, that was our first one, will continue that weekly, and that will help shed light on our weekly COVID data here in the Kenilworth schools. The fourth consideration is the only proactive consideration, which is looking at post-holiday instruction. So we know that going all remote after Thanksgiving made sense. We saw a rise in the number of school community cases reported to us during that week of remote learning. It gave us time to contact trace, avoid us having very many close contacts in school, and allowed us to return last week to school with very few instances of positive cases. Here are the takeaways from those 4 considerations. While there is a decision-making framework that we use in accordance with professional guidance, there's no formula for closing. Additional consideration is that while we're proud of our ability to open school and keep schools open, and while we should be proud that contagion is not on record as having occurred in our schools, that can't be the reason we don't pivot to remote learning when the other considerations I just shared are at play. Once a thoughtful decision is made, we look to communicate that out as soon as possible. We realize last-minute notifications, while sometimes they can't be helped, are stressful and problematic to families. Here's a typical sequence of a communication using last Friday's decision. On a 9 a.m. phone call with the health officer, the strong recommendation to pivot to remote learning was made. After notifying the groups on this timeline, parent notification was sent mid-afternoon at around 2:45. We want that notification to be more than just we're closed because our town is in the red. Sincerely, the Kenilworth Public Schools. So to make that communication as useful as possible, it does take a few hours sometimes. I realize and appreciate the students and adults may suffer when they're not in school. That's why we put so much attention on social and emotional learning this year. The work our counselors, CST members, Care Plus clinicians, and so many others are doing is tremendous, and I really can't say enough about it. There have been student survey check-ins, risk assessments, expanded curriculum, parent learning opportunities, and so much more. The Student Personnel Services Department will be sending out an update later in the week where the resources and supports are available to you all in one place. As I mentioned earlier, while it's helpful for parents and others to share what neighboring districts are doing, each district and township's circumstances are different. Comparing us to other small districts isn't overly useful all the time. The state, the school district, and the township data matters most. But still, I do confer regularly with my colleagues to explore thinking and decision-making of our neighboring districts. The This is particularly useful when we're making proactive decisions, like exploring the possibility of pivoting to all remote instruction after the holidays. We'll be sharing more of the details about that decision by the end of this week. A sort of final plea here is to really read closely our updates. We look to provide a lot of detail, but also make them manageable and digestible in length because we recognize how busy everyone is. But the why behind the decision is always in the update, and the messages across the superintendent's office, the principal's desks, and the director's departments all aim to stay on message. So many questions we receive are already answered in those updates, so please check them out. And after you do, if questions persist, we still have our reopening email up and running. I guess we should probably look to change the name of that soon, but until then, it's monitored closely and emails are shared with the individuals most able to answer questions. I hope you found this screencast useful. And if you have questions, please feel free to reach out at any time. Thanks, everyone.